So my name's Joseph O'Connor. I live in the UK, in London. I'm an executive coach. I'm a writer on coaching. I've written 20 books on that, not on coaching, but on generally business communication skills and coaching. I enjoy writing very much. I also train coaches, and I'm co-founder of the International Coaching Community, which is 20 years old this year and is one of the largest community of trained coaches in the world at the moment. Well, my career has been over several different things. Originally, I was a musician. I was a guitarist. I was a concert guitarist. I used to teach guitar and I used to play guitar. And this meant that the two problems that I had, first of all, was how do you give your best in a difficult performance situation, like being on stage and playing to an audience? And also, how do you help other people? Because I was teaching guitar as well. And I remember that when I was teaching, and many very good players, I would listen to them playing when I was outside the door. They were just practicing. I wasn't there. So they would play beautifully. I would come in, I would sit down as the teacher. Immediately, their state would deteriorate. They would get nervous. They wouldn't play so well. So this kind of led me into exactly the sort of coaching questions that we have. You know, what are the ways that we are not able to give our best? And how can we give the best performance? And I think this is true whether you're a guitarist or a performing artist or an executive or a trainer or anybody who has to communicate with other people. But the music was a great start. I went on from music to write about psychology and learning, and then on to coaching and training. But I trace it back to those moments in teaching guitar. Well, that's a huge question, creativity. I mean, creativity is about producing something that's new, but it's also useful. People can always, there's lots of things that are new, but they're not always useful. So I think creativity for a coach is about certainly the ability to understand the client, to kind of walk in the client's shoes, and to be able to help them empathically, but without getting involved or entangled with them in the issue. And the creativity for coaches is mostly around how can I best help this person by asking questions that will help to unlock their own creativity, because that's what you want as a coach. You want the client to be creative in terms of problem solving, because at the moment that they have some kind of block, which is usually some idea that they have that's stopping them from solving the problem. Oh, okay. The other thing was effective. So an effective coach is somebody who gets results for the client. Yeah, the coach judges the success. Doesn't make any sense. You judge it by the client success. And in order to be effective, I think you need to be able to understand the client, to relate to the client, to put the client at the center stage, and to help the client to understand their own goals, what they want, the direction that they're going in, what's important to them, their values and emotions, and also their ideas. And there's a saying in coaching circles that the problem is not the problem is the way that the client is thinking about the problem. So basically what a coach is doing is helping to light up the client's own thinking for themselves, so that they can look at their own thinking, see where it's holding them back, and change effectively. Because of course a client can't change, a coach can't change a client directly, nor can they change the situation directly, nor can they change anybody else directly. So it's all down to the way that the client is thinking. Well, I'm not sure. I can answer that first of all by, um, well, my experience in performance, my experience over the years, my experience in coaching a lot of executives in various multinational companies gives me a basis to start with. Um, Recently, I've been extremely interested in the neuroscience aspect, so how the brain works, because this is something that's been neglected to a very large extent in coaching. And the way that the brain actually works, and as we find out more about how the brain works, it is showing what coaching models are useful and actually work, and it's also showing what coaching models are insufficient and need to be refined in the light of what we know about how the brain actually works, as opposed to how we hope it works or how we think it works or how we just really don't know how it works. So that's a big interest of mine at the moment. Yes, yeah. Um, because again, I think there's a gap here. I think there's a gap in terms of coaching, that we need to understand how the brain works, because the brain is involved in every decision that we make. Um, unless you and you know, people talk about emotional intelligence. You can't really talk about emotional intelligence unless you know how emotions are generated and how they work. Otherwise, how can you be intelligent about them? So the thing about understanding how the brain works is that you can, first of all, help the client to understand their own behaviors and their own thinking from another point of view, which is very liberating for the client to start with, that perspective. And secondly, you can understand in particular how habits are built, because when I talk about habits, I'm not just talking about playing the guitar or playing tennis or something like that. I'm talking about things that you do without thinking, that you do automatically because you've done them many times before. And this is not just about things you do, it's about things you think. So we have habitual thinking patterns that are built up by repetition in the brain through the, you know, that actually takes place in the brain through increased connections between neurons that you can actually see, and that actually are thought patterns that, of course, can be very empowering and liberating, but they also can be limiting. And so to understand how these are built and then to be able to unpick them and replace them with something else is, I think, one of the greatest breakthroughs in terms of what neuroscience can add to coaching, because this is what coaches basically do. They help clients to change their thinking habits in order to go ahead and empower them to do what they want to happen. Well, when you're training coaching, um, you need all the skills of a trainer, the communication skills, the presence, the ability to know your subject, and to impart it, but also you need to demonstrate the coaching approach in the way that you train. So it's a little bit different. The message in a training is not only information, and especially not in something like coaching. You know, if I was teaching IT, then a lot of information would be there. It would be very important. People could go away and do it. But when you're teaching a behavioral skill, the most important thing is to actually demonstrate that behavioral skill in the way that you are teaching it. So from that point of view, I would say, apart from the usual things about training communication, ability to empathize with students, you need also the ability to walk the talk. Uh, well, personally, I prefer physical, and I think that, probably most people do. It's what we're used to. And, you know, a few million years of evolution has built us into social creatures. You know, we want other people. We need other people. It's very important that that proximity, that reality of somebody else, which can never be completely replaced by anything, not even in virtual reality. So that's built into us, and we rely on that communication to make meaning and understand. And so that's my own preference. Of course, it can work more or less well to do training and meetings over Zoom, as we are doing now. It depends on well, a lot of things on how good the connection is, because you know you're talking with someone, you need to see them, you need that feedback. The worst thing is just to talk into a blank space. You know, you're not seeing or hearing anybody, because then you don't know how it's being received. And as communicators, we change the second half of our sentence based on how we see the reaction to the first half. You know, this is what we do. So it makes it more difficult. But, you know, with COVID and the way that technology is going anyway, this is what we have had to change in many different ways. And we're extremely adaptable creatures as well. We can adapt. But I think it's worth remembering that the adaptation doesn't mean to say that it works as well as what you did before. It's simply that you get different sort of information and you find other ways to get the information that you need. So I'm very glad that technology had reached the degree that it had when COVID struck. Otherwise, we would be in much more serious trouble than we are. But at the same time, speaking for myself, but I think many other people, miss that engagement with others. And I did a lot of traveling. I trained all over the world, and that was my great joy, to go to other countries, to meet people from other countries, to engage with them, to find out something new about that. And that's been a sadness for me that I haven't been able to do that. Well, we mentioned coaching the brain training. That's what I'm going to be continuing in January. So it's all online. There are no face-to-face meetings, and it's basically a training that is going to. It has a certification of neuroscience coach. So what you're getting is the latest research in neuroscience in a practical way. So if I can do a quick blurb for the book here. This is the book that I wrote about it, Coaching the Brain. It's very important. It says here, practical applications of neuroscience to coaching. So it's not about learning all Latin names for different parts of the brain, but it's about how does the brain work? What does this mean in practice? And how can we use it in terms of how we think, the traps of thinking, of memory, of creativity. We do a lot about creativity and how the brain works in creativity and how to tap into that, about neuroplasticity and how we learn, how the brain is able to, it actually changes in response to our experience. This, again, just to show this, it has a candle and flame at the beginning. And this is a metaphor. I think it's a powerful metaphor because the candle is material. It's made of wax. The flame is not material. And yet the two go together. So you have the brain, which is material. It's made mostly of fat and water. It's rather like soft butter. But it's really material. And then the thoughts and the thinking and the awareness, which is not material. And yet they go together. And this is a miracle. I think this is amazing. So thinking affects the material of our brain, which then affects our thinking. So you get this feedback loop. So how can we learn in the best way? How can we use that in the best way? How can we develop our habits of thinking in the best way to be most empowering? How are our beliefs and ideas built up? What about our values and emotions? What's important to us? How do emotions work? And how do we deal with them in ourselves and others? These are fascinating and at the basis of all communication, all self-understanding, and all coaching. And so what I'm bringing to this is another perspective on it in order to make the picture that much brighter and better, and for coaches to be more effective and successful, and I should say credible, because I think that in the next years, maybe 5 years or so, it's going to be really important for coaches to know neuroscience. They need that credibility of being able to know that. So that will start in the program will start in the new year. The new program. I've already been running the program for 3 years, but a new iteration is going to be starting. There are 3 modules to it: goals, values and emotions, and beliefs. And to do the whole program, it's all online. It would probably take you, if you did it in your own time, about 4 to 5 months or so. Yeah, yeah. You know, progressing at your own pace. You could do it quicker. You could do it slower. But the nice thing about online learning is that you can do it at your own pace, and I'm there to support you with live support as well.